Welcome to the Hunter's Quest. This is Hunter McWaters, your host, and I'm here today with my guest, Remi Warren. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for taking the time to join me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So if you guys don't know Remi, you definitely should check out his stuff on YouTube and Amazon Prime. Remi started out as a guide, an outdoor writer, photographer, videographer. He is also one of the hosts of Solo Hunter along with Tim Burnett. And he's been a repeat guest on Meat Eater. He's also been on Joe Rogan's podcast. And last but not least, he is my guest on the 100th episode of the Hunter's Quest podcast, which you guys can go check out if you want to hear a little bit more detail about Remi and kind of his backstory and that kind of stuff, and just a longer conversation. Go check out that episode 100 of the podcast. But yeah, just to kind of get things rolling here, man. I mean, you've done a lot in your career so far. Is there a certain accomplishment, whether that be like in your career or even just in life, that you're kind of like most proud of to this point?
Pretty much every time I pull off a successful solo filmed bow hunt, that's pretty hard to do. And then this past year, I got to do those with shooting a mouth tab. So I was running the camera one-handed, shooting one-handed. I think that like if you're looking at the hardest thing to do, that's probably it.
Yeah, you have a habit of doing things that are very difficult to do. So I think you kind of like the challenge, it seems like. But if you guys don't know what he's referring to, Remi got a hand injury, I guess was that last year or 2 years ago? A lot of guys might have just taken the season off or, decided they weren't going to bow hunt, but Remi said, nah, I'm going to go for it. And so he actually taught himself how to shoot with a mouth tab.
Yeah, I was fortunate that I've got a friend that had, he shoots with a mouth tab all the time because he's got a permanent injury to his hand. And so he showed me the ropes a little bit, and he got me all set up and then kind of just took it from there.
Super cool accomplishment to be able to pull that off. So the series that we're gonna kind of like watch and talk through a little bit is this caribou hunt you guys did in Greenland. I guess that would have been August of 2022, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was last year, and
cool.
Yeah, I think it was. I guess it was August. It was the beginning of September, end of August.
Okay, so yeah, you've hunted caribou quite a bit, no?
Yeah, I've hunted caribou quite a bit, mostly in Alaska. So a couple years, well, it was probably 5 years ago, somebody that I know was like, dude, if you want to hunt caribou, do it now. Because the opportunities are going to get severely limited. I'm glad I took his advice because I just kind of like got on this caribou kick about, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years ago. And and I've had a lot of awesome hunts for him since. So.
Yeah, for sure, man. Again, kind of going back to why I wanted to talk about caribou hunting, it's kind of one of those hunts that is sort of a bucket list hunt for a lot of guys, or like a dream kind of species for a lot of guys. But at the same time, there are still some kind of, over the counter, even some DIY stuff, if you're willing to put in some work and do a little research. So while it is, kind of a bucket list species, it also is attainable.
Yeah, there's still a few opportunities out there where, you can pick up a tag, get a harvest ticket, and hunt caribou, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. My first backcountry trip ever, I think I was telling you this the other day, was an Alaska DIY, walk-in caribou hunt. That trip just changed my life and kind of set me on this path that I'm on now. Why did you guys decide as a group you wanted to do Greenland instead of Alaska or Canada?
Well, I actually had a trip planned last year for caribou in Alaska, and the season got shut down. So it was and it's going to be shut down for who knows how long. And then we had an opportunity through a friend to go hunt in Greenland, and it was like, okay, that was a species of caribou that I haven't hunted before, and it's a place that I haven't been. So, but wherever you're caribou hunting, there's a lot of things that are the same, a lot of things that translate. Yeah. So, with caribou, I kind of feel like caribou hunting itself is very similar to pronghorn hunting in some ways. It's not real difficult. But the difference with caribou hunting is the access issue is extremely difficult because they just live in places that are hard to get to.
At first I was like, okay, Greenland, it seems so much more difficult logistically and financially or whatever to pull off than Alaska, but that might not actually be the case. Is it like a lot harder than Alaska, or what's it like?
No, I mean, for a guy to do it DIY, it's a lot more difficult because it's not set up as much. But for like, as far as like cost goes, it's probably actually cheaper than going to Alaska, because you just like, you fly to Iceland, and then from there you fly over to Greenland.
So kind of like Caribou 101 here for people who don't know much about it, in terms of their kind of yearly life cycle, and as far as how hunting season plays into that, and like the time of year most guys are hunting caribou. Are they entering rut? Are they pre-rut? Are they,
Yeah, I mean, most people probably hunt them during August or September, I would say. Like, that just seems to be standard. They're most of the time in velvet. They're an animal that just moves a lot. Like, they kind of move erratically in some ways, or seems to be erratic. But one thing about caribou you'll find is like they pretty much always travel into the wind. So when the wind shifts, that's what determines their direction. And like generally with like there's no wind, they just sit down, and then it gets windy, and then they start walking again. From my experience.
Okay. Yeah. And so have you ever done a later like rut hunt for caribou?
Yeah, it's a fun time to hunt for sure. Any animal during the rut is a lot of fun, just to see the way that they interact. And you don't have to deal with velvet antlers, which is nice. But you also, run into a weather factor. Like, I know a lot of guys that have hunted late and been stuck for a really long time, or never actually got to go on the hunt.
That would be terrible. Whether you're hunting caribou in Greenland, or maybe it's not even caribou, but it's just a new area. So something that guys on the East Coast like me deal with a lot is you obviously want to e-scout as much as you can beforehand, but sometimes things change. Sometimes you don't know exactly where you're gonna be. Let's say, Remi Warren gets dropped off in a new area you've never been before, you've never e-scouted it. What is kind of going through your head? What's your thought process of how you're gonna start to develop a strategy to hunt a new area that's completely new to you?
Hunting a new area, it just depends on the species, right? So I kind of base my play off of like what those animals do. But the general thing that I do is I like to preview where I'm at. So I'm just going to get to some vantages and just overlook the country. I like to just like take a day, take 2 days, and just really like figure out the lay of the land, really, and get an idea of like how things are, and then I kind of build my plan based off of that. And I've done that successfully all around the world I've done DIY hunts in the Northern Territories for buffalo, and like what I did there was the same thing, just learn the area and then figure out, okay, now here's where these types of things are, here's what I'm looking for, maybe in that case it was water, and then I build out my hunt plan that way. It doesn't matter where it's at. Kind of the same thing, like figure out, okay, hey, this is a new spot, never been here before, but I'm really gonna like understand the terrain and the topography, and then find out the things that I like for the way that I like to hunt and the way that the animals should be behaving, and then I focus in on those areas.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's kind of a keep it simple approach, but a lot of guys I feel like that are on a limited time frame in a new area, they kind of like, you kind of freak out. But I like how you said just kind of sort of just like take a step back, like kind of mentally prepare yourself that like the first day or two is going to be basically scouting. And then as you start to see more animals pop out, you start to recognize like, oh, they like this specific elevation, or they seem to like this type of terrain or brush or whatever it is. And you start to kind of learn where to look,
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like if you know where to look, that's the key. And if you use what you got, you're already ahead.
As I'm getting deeper and deeper into Western hunting and stuff, I'm kind of analyzing the differences in hunting culture from like the Southeast to the out West, and it's interesting. And, it's talked about a lot, but it can't really be overstated how big of a deal glassing is for Western hunting. And it's really like, when I grew up bow hunting, I don't think I even took binoculars with me, like ever. Like it just wasn't part of my gear. But it's something that it's basically the large majority of Western hunting is glassing. It's a little bit more nuanced than just pulling up your binoculars and just looking. I mean, and I know you've talked about it quite a bit, and spent a lot of time thinking about it. So I'd love to hear just kind of your basic general tips or strategies on glassing a new area.
First thing, it seems like a no-brainer, but anytime I go hunting with people that didn't grow up glassing, they just don't have their glass to their head enough. Like, you got to look through the things for them to work.
Yes.
I mean, I'm glassing 90% of the time, it seems like. Like, my natural eyes are looking, but I'm looking like through my binoculars a lot. And then you got to identify, like, it takes a long time to really know what you're looking for. There's been a lot of, I mean, I've hunted with hundreds of people, and very rarely will somebody spot something before me. And it's because I have a trained eye. Like, I know where to look and I know what I'm looking for. Like, I do what I call, I've kind of like coined this term, but it's like strategic shotgun glassing is the first way that I start looking. So I look in all the places that are most productive for whatever I'm hunting. So if it's mule deer, I'm looking in the mornings. I'm like looking, I like quickly scan the ridges, then I look at like potential feeding areas, and then as the day progresses, then I'm looking in like good bedding areas. Like, I'm looking in the best place at the best time. And then outside of that, then I'm doing like a gridding method where it's like, okay, I haven't found anything, but I'm just sitting down for the day and covering a lot of country back and forth, up and down, left and right. It's just like learning to develop that eye, and then just being patient with it too.
I found exactly what you're talking about. This season I was in Mexico hunting Coues deer, and the first 2 days or something, my hunting partner Brad he was spotting everything. And finally got to the third day and I just got fed up. But what it came down to is I just didn't have my face in the glass enough. And like you said, it takes discipline. It's not easy because it's just not comfortable to hold that thing to your face for hours and hours all day, but it really is a function of how much time you put in there to what you see. Like, as soon as I like mentally decided, okay, like I'm done getting embarrassed, like I'm gonna start spotting deer, I started spotting deer. And the other thing to me, which I found was really important, was making sure you have a comfortable glassing setup. So I know different guys do different stuff. I personally like, if I'm glassing for a long time, to have like a set of 12s or something on a tripod, because you're not holding it, your arms and hands aren't getting tired, and also you can use both eyes. If you're using spotter for a long time with one eye, that can get really uncomfortable. So I like binos on a tripod, but what's kind of your go-to setup for glassing?
I do 90% of the glassing with binoculars. I use a spotting scope for more verification purposes.
Yeah.
I'll put them on a tripod for sure. It just depends on the situation. When it's on a tripod, there's less shake, so there's a little less eye fatigue. It depends on your scenario though, because like sometimes you're just checking a lot of different pockets. Other times you're sitting up from a long ways away and glassing at distance. So it just depends on where I'm glassing and what. But yeah, I do a combination of binoculars on a tripod, spotting scope, and then just handheld. Honestly, it doesn't matter what it is, you just got to put it to your face. I see so many people with like good binoculars that just never use them. And so I always say, like, put money, if you're going to spend money on one particular piece of gear, optics, boots, and pack are the three things you want to spend money on generally, because pack and boots are the like uncomfortable touch points, and then optics are like pretty much your success maker or breaker.
Okay, good advice. I want to go back to the Greenland film here. Give me a little bit of background on this specific caribou.
Yeah, we'd spotted him from across the way, and then Pedro and I decided I was like, all right, I'm going to make a play on this one. It was actually one of the bigger ones we'd seen. What had happened was he was feeding with another smaller bull, and then they fed over the ridge. We circled around to get the wind right, dropped our packs, and moved in. And I got into a position where he actually crossed, and it was like a pretty good shot, but I just wasn't ready. Like, it just wasn't right for me. So I waited, I held off. And he went, I was waiting for him to go over the rise, and then waiting for the other one to go over, and then moved up to get to where they just went over. And he had it was actually really cliffy there, and he kind of gone around the cliff where I popped over, and his body was actually obstructed. And then he kind of heard something. He turned around and then spooked off. So we just watched him, and then he went across the valley, and it was getting near the end of the day. We just said, all right, it's all or nothing. Let's just go over and see what happens. So crossed down, came back up, and when I popped back up, the wind, like I mentioned earlier, they do like to walk in the wind. The wind had shifted, and he essentially started walking back up to our direction. He was going the other way, and then the wind in the thermal started sweeping down, and he just wheeled around and started feeding the other way. So we got into position there behind this big rock.
Poppy,
Meh. Meh. How far is he? He was slightly quartered too, so I put it like in a spot on that shoulder there, not on the shoulder, but anticipating it to go, like a good quartered two shot, just slightly quartered two, and let her rip, hit the exact spot that I was aiming at, and he just fell over, double lungs, and fell over within sight. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it may not have been quite as big of a concern on this hunt, maybe, but proper meat care is a big deal. You mentioned it kind of already in this conversation, but especially when you're dealing with velvet antlers too. And I feel like a lot of guys don't know anything about that. So, and you gotta be, sometimes in these kind of more northern areas, you gotta be a little creative. Back when I did a Kodiak hunt a few years ago, we shot a deer on like this first or second full day. And we had to kind of get creative about, there wasn't really any wood to build anything. So we ended up using some stones from the like glacial lake we were right by to kind of get that, the meat up off the ground and stuff like that. But, I know you were very intentional about caring for your meat because you're also a pretty good wild game chef. But generally, what are some of your meat care in the field kind of tips for guys?
You got to keep it cool. You got to keep it dry. You got to keep it clean. And by doing those things, it's going to be good. The first step is just like getting on and breaking it down quick, getting that hide off, cooling it down as fast as possible. And then even while you're working, just getting those quarters or whatever off the ground and letting that air circulate around it, because the moving air actually cools it down pretty quick. There's times where, like you said, there's nothing to hang it from. So, there's been times where I've hiked more miles finding wood to build like a good rack, a good drying rack, than I do hunting the animal. And the same thing, like you want to have tarps to tarp over it for shade and to just keep it dry, and then continually like move the meat around. So you're just trying to prohibit bacterial growth. And so just like being super clean about when you don't want to get any dirt on it. You want to keep it in game bags. You want to keep the flies and things off of it. And you do those things, man, it's going to make a big difference in the end product.
Yeah, no, totally. So if you're in an area where there's grizzly bears, are you storing your meat in camp with the idea of trying to protect it, or are you keeping it pretty far from camp? What's your strategy there?
For the most part, it's somewhere that I can hang it and hang it out of reach. And you're like, well, there's places where that's not possible. It's like, there is, you just might have to hike further to find it. Like, it's just what you do. So, I've done that before. I've also had it in camp or like near camp. And then if I have a bear fence, I don't really trust a bear fence for it, but I don't know. It makes you feel like a little bit better, I guess. And then just somewhere that you have like good visual of it. There's times where you just want to be like, make sure that you can approach with a view, and you don't have like, you aren't doing something stupid like putting it in the middle of an alder patch or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
But
and you're essentially going to be treating velvet antlers almost like another piece of meat in terms of their capacity to go bad, right?
Yeah, early in the season when it's attached real good, you just kind of treat it like the meat. Keep it dry, keep it cool, and then when you get back, you got to take care of it. Either freeze it or preserve it.
All right, well, cool, man. Do you have any just like closing thoughts on caribou hunting, or why it's so special or unique, or kind of why somebody should go out of their way to try to hunt one?
Yeah, they're just a really cool animal, and they're very unique to that northern landscape. You get to go to some pretty remote places to chase them. I think that's just part of the adventure, is just being in a place where they live is really cool. The other cool thing about them is they've got so much antler for their body size. It's just cool to see them running around. You like the first one you see, you go, whoa, like thing's crazy looking, because they are. They're really almost in some ways kind of prehistoric. And it's a cool and unique experience. I've hunted a lot of different places and different styles for different kinds of caribou, and each one is a little bit unique, but in the end, they're all a lot of fun.
Well, cool, man. Well, thanks again for your time. I think it's been great. I think we covered some good ground here on caribou hunting, and hopefully, like I said, this will inspire some guys to get out there and give it a shot or start looking to plan something. So thanks again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.